have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting me wouldn't last long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Longtime listeners of the show will be familiar with our Always in Motion segment. We usually have this segment during ongoing series when we predict what's going to happen in the next episode of TV, or if it's the finale, what we can expect from the next season. In the case of the next seasons, they're really fun because they are way too early. Like, we don't know anything that's going to happen in a couple years, and we still are spouting off what we think is going to happen. So for today's episode, we thought we'd ratchet that concept up all the way to 11, and we are going to try and predict what's going to happen in a video game that's not going to come out for years. That probably honestly hasn't even been completely storyboarded yet. Because today we are talking Jedi 3, the next installment in the beloved Jedi series. We're going to give y'all what we know, we're going to give y'all what we expect, and we're going to give you what we want out of this sequel to Jedi Survivor. And here to peer into the future with me is none other than my longtime co-host, the laughing Latero himself, Colin Archer.
Hey, Carter, man, another episode coming at you. It's fun. This one's a really good one. I've been playing an insane amount of video games recently. So many have come out, including a really fun Star Wars games that if you're listening to this, you need to scroll back and listen to Star Wars Outlaws with Kay Vess. Very fun story, very fun gameplay, and we want more of that. And this is one thing that we know for sure is coming out is Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi whatever they're going to call it this time, 3.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like you said, we know for sure it's coming out. And so, as I said at the beginning of the show, we're going to break this down to what we know, what we expect, and what we want. And as far as what we know, I think you just summed up the entire section, is that there is a third game, and it is coming. I bet you can bet money that Cal Kestis will be in it, and that's probably all that you can really, really bank on for the game so far. It's been really radio silent since the release of Survivor about a year ago, a little more than a year ago now. And so it's interesting that they've had such a media blackout over this game, and we haven't really heard a whole lot, but we're certain that it's coming because they've made so much money on these Jedi games. They're so popular. Everybody loves them. Star Wars fans love them. We, not that big of Star Wars fans love them. Just casual fans love them. They're well-received action-adventure games. And so there's no reason they wouldn't make a third. And that's pretty much all that we know about the third game, is that there will be one.
Yeah, if anything, and this isn't even a legit criticism, there's not the longevity of them. As far as I know, there's people not going back and playing them over and over again. I don't seek that out. There's other more popular games where people replay constantly. But that's such a minor point. The point is exactly like you just said. When these games come out, they sell hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies. There's people streaming them constantly. There's people getting 100%. There's people completing speed runs. This game has everything you could ever want in almost any video game. Fun, good characters, really cool mechanics, getting to live through Jedi's, not Jedi, using the lightsaber, using the Force, using mind tricks on stuff. And so plus it's its own unique story. So there's everything in this game you could want in a Star Wars game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's being a Jedi is obviously the most popular part of any kind of Star Wars video game. We talked about a lot when Outlaws was coming out in the Outlaws episode, how it's super unique that Outlaws is from the perspective of someone in the underworld. And just your average weapon is a blaster. There's no lightsabers in that game from what I've seen, unless there's one on some side mission that I wasn't aware of. Vader didn't even pull out a lightsaber, I don't believe, at any point. And so this is this Jedi game is like the bread and butter of Star Wars. It's like when you watch Star Wars as a kid or as an adult or as anybody, it's like what's your big takeaway from that movie? Oh, I want to be a Jedi. I want to have a lightsaber. And so Jedi Survivor lets you, or the Jedi series lets you kind of live that out. And so, like you said, there's not longevity with these games like we understand a lot of 21st century games or in the 2020s where you get games that are meant to be out for years and they're just getting updates like Call of Duty Warzone or Fortnite or Rocket League or pick any game in the top 10 games streamed on Twitch, and they're almost certainly games that released a year, 2, 3 years ago and have continuously released a stream of content. But they're also competitive games, and this isn't a competitive game. This is a single player, you play through, action adventure. If you're a completionist, you get 100%, you get all the trophies, and then that's really, like you said, that's it. You put a bow on it. Unless you want to go try to beat it on a harder difficulty, there's not really a new challenge coming to Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, all these other games have DLCs. There's no DLCs with this game, and they don't need them, frankly. The quality of the gameplay is so high, and the quality of the story is so high that we get this awesome package wrapped up in a really pretty bow that we have fun with it. And the DLC is the next game coming out,
yeah, exactly. And they're expansive games. They're big, and they take a pretty good chunk of time. The story is good. They have actors on the level of Cameron Monaghan with all of this mocap stuff. I mean, there's a lot that goes into these games. It took them 4 years to make Survivor after Fallen Order came out, and I'd be willing to bet, it's another 3 years before we get Jedi 3. But like we said at the beginning, all we really know is that it's coming. We don't know anything else for sure about this game. And so we have a lot to talk about because there's some expectations that we're going to have that are almost certainly going to be true. And then there's some wants that it's like, this would be super cool, but we don't know if they're going to go in this direction or whatever. So I think we should dive into what we expect, kind of get our expectations out of the way. And that doesn't mean that 100% of these are going to come true, but I would be willing to bet that most, if not all of these, end up happening just by virtue of where the story was left off on Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, there's so many different common sense things that we're going to get into. It just makes perfect sense, and are like the next evolution for these characters that exist. What a Jedi would face in the Star Wars universe. It's going to be fun to talk about. It really is.
Yeah. So let's dive in with probably the most easy prediction of what we expect, and that is that this game takes place before A New Hope.
Yeah.
The game. Go ahead.
Yeah. The biggest reason for this is like they're not going to age Cal Kestis up past anything, and I think it's kind of obvious they want everything past. Like Mandalorian, they want that to exist in their own universe, right? This guy has his own unique story that has 3 parts to it, and we're going to see what this third part is that exists on its own, can stand on its own merit, and doesn't need anybody else's coattails to ride on.
Right. No, it doesn't. It doesn't need any other coattails to ride on. It is its own isolated story. And you have to look at the difficulties of when would this game take place otherwise. I mean, it's never going to go back in time. We're not going to get a prequel game. This is obviously going to be a sequel to Survivor. And so you can block out anything before Survivor. And then, like you said, they're not going to age Cal Kestis up a whole lot. There was 5 years between Fallen Order and Survivor, and there were 4 years of production. So Cameron Monaghan basically aged the same as he would have anyways for that game. And I'm kind of expecting the same thing, like 5 BBY. If someone made me bet money on when this game was going to take place, I'd probably say 5 BBY. Maybe a little bit closer to the Rebellion, 3 or 2 BBY. But we're not going to get anything. We're not going to get anything further past basically Rogue One, but even before that, because you run into a lot of problems if you take Cal past like 1 BBY when the Rebellion is out there and they're like, we are here and they are their own thing trying to fight for independence, because then you get the questions of, well, why didn't Cal just join these people? Like it can't be that hard for him to get in contact with them. Like it's just, that would be unreasonable. And if Cal's been operating as basically his own little rebel cell with Grease and Marin and the Mantis crew for 10 years at this point, then why has he not contacted the rebellion? So I really will be, I will bet that it's between 6 BBY and 2 BBY is where we're going to find the sweet spot there. Because the only other possibility is that we get something set during the original trilogy, and you still run into the problems of why wasn't Cal helping the rebellion? Unless they just wrap him up totally in the rebellion, and then you get a lot of questions of like, well, why was Luke the only Jedi that these people knew of? Like, there's just a lot that goes on with any of these Jedi characters living past a certain point. And that's not to say that Cal's going to die, but I do think Cal's not going to be a piece on the chessboard during the original trilogy. Something will remove him, the same as Ezra got removed at the end of Rebels, and the same Kanan got removed.
I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly. What I would put my money on if there were like a betting opportunity for would be the same way they ended with Omega, at the end of Bad Batch. Basically ended it at just a little bit before, right around, or right after 1 BBY. It was intentionally ambiguous. It's like, these people need my help. And if I remember correctly, they left that question of if she was overtly force sensitive. She had an M count, but it was kind of, left unclear if it was answered. There's no answers in this case. We have all the answers in this case. And I agree, I don't think he's going to die. But the reality is, even in the Star Wars galaxy, it's so vast, and we're only seeing a very small slice of a pie, or in the case of the Battle of Yavin, the biggest slices of the pie. But but in the context of a galaxy-spanning empire and these major turn points, there's hundreds of millions, and that's probably exaggerating a tad. There's millions of points of inflection where a rebel cell is going to have a very broad impact that these characters could exist in. But that is all to say, I hope they kind of go that Omega route and leave that up to our imagination, because what we're about to talk about leaves a bunch of stuff open for a good story that can exist in another trilogy that could involve Omega literally, or some of these other rebel cells. That would be fun. Something maybe for the comic book realm or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Well, and there's the other aspect of this, in that I think it's far-fetched to say they're going to kill off Cal, because they went to all this trouble casting an actual real-life actor that looks identical to the character, and we know that he's discussed wanting to be on TV shows. It's theorized that after the trilogy of the Survivor games, he's going to be released to go be able to be in TV shows and as a guest character on things. And there's a reason we haven't seen him in other Star Wars products yet. But you got to think about what's coming out in the time period where it would be reasonable for him to make a cameo appearance. And we're not really expecting anything in that time period for a while. I mean, Andor Season 2 is it. And I do not think Cal is going to be in Andor Season 2. That's a pretty far-fetched idea. And so Cal is going to be in something. Is he going to be in the Ahsoka stuff? Is he going to be in the Dave Filoni movie? Is he going to be in these things down the line? Is he going to pop up in the Rey movie? All these things are possibilities, but he's going to have to survive to do that. And so we're going to have a reason that, one, Cal didn't fight in the Galactic Civil War, and two, how he's popping back up around that time period, and what kept him from popping back up prior. And so I think that that'll be answered in the game. And if they leave it ambiguous, that's fine, but they'll have to answer that for fans eventually. Same with Ahsoka. We don't have the reason she wasn't involved yet. There's a lot of fan theories around it, but it's never been solidified. And eventually they're going to have to tell us why wasn't Ahsoka part of the rebellion at the time, because the longer, if it never happens, if they never tell us, it cheapens her story. The same as it will with Cal.
Yeah.
The same as it will with Cal.
Those are great points. I don't have anything to add.
So let's move on to some more expectations, some things that are pretty clear from the end of Survivor. And the first one of those is that Cal and Marin are basically Kata's parents now. They're going to end up raising Kata. Now Cal and Marin aren't together. That the end of Survivor does get them pretty close. Doesn't cement the relationship completely, but it is almost certain that Kata is going to have to be reared somehow, and you can't just let peace out on some force sensitive child. You can't just say, all right, goodbye. And we don't know if she's force sensitive for sure, but her dad's a Jedi. Boda Kuna is her dad, and he's almost certainly passed on the force sensitivity. So it's pretty easy to assume that Cal and Marin are going to be raising this little girl and that she's going to be force sensitive.
Yeah, and that's, in my opinion, what the biggest revolution of where the story's going to be. At least the first act of it, right? And because think of all the parallels across all these other things. She's too old to be trained, right?
Right.
And she's faced an immense amount of hardship. I don't remember the story with her mom, what exactly it was, but she lived in an Imperial facility with her dad disappearing constantly to go on all these secret spy missions. And then died in front of her, and he was his legacy is as a bad guy, quote unquote. So
right, absolutely.
And just I'm no writer, I'm not some screenplay person, but these characters aren't going to be without their perils, and so how is that going to manifest in the game, right? Because you have Cal Kestis as the Boken Jedi, as a semi-Boken, he was raised as a Padawan somewhat, but had through the force of will and trial and peril, became a fully fledged Jedi, a knight, right? And so here's his Padawan. I mean, this is the most lowest hanging fruit opportunity of a story they have. And then all those other troublesome talking points I mentioned is going to be a hugely fun catalyst for some tension in the story.
Right. Because there's a vacuum left over after Survivor. Survivor has Cal, like you said, operating as a Jedi Knight pretty independently. He's gone his own way aside from Marin and Seer and everybody else. And Seer and Eno Cordova are both killed. One, we didn't even know Cordova was alive until Survivor, but they're both killed in Survivor. And so there's a vacuum in the little Survivor verse that they've carved out of the Wizened Master Jedi, the Wizened Masters. And so Cal and Marin both kind of have to fill that role. And we already saw them begin to fill that role in Survivor. Like you said, they were really coming into their own in Survivor. And now I think they're both even further down the line going to have a more experienced, more serious air about them. But the use of the word Padawan is super interesting for Kata, because that's kind of more in the air. Like, I'm not willing to go out and say that I expect her to be a Jedi, because I don't know how Cal feels about recreating the Order. He already had some qualms about that in the first two games. And Marin's influence is in a totally different direction. Marin's got the Night Sister influence, and so these two characters understand how dangerous it is to be a Force user in the galaxy at this time. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're taking this little girl and being a lot more practical about her training and not saying you're a Jedi, you're going to save the galaxy, yada yada, but instead just being like, you have the Force, here's how you use it to defend yourself. Here is Jedi ways and Night Sister ways to do that. And so Kata, I'm not saying she's going to end up a Night Sister either, but I am going to say that I think she's going to be more than a Boken Jedi, but more like just a general Boken Force user. She's going to have a broader Force user training experience than maybe any character I can think of aside from Asajj Ventress.
Like something like a Force user that bridges the gap between the two Force disciplines, if you will.
Sure, sort of, because I hesitate to say that any character can really bridge between the light and the dark side. That's getting into gray Jedi territory, and that's going against Lucas's vision. But I definitely can see this girl tapping into the Night Sister stuff a little bit for defense, and the Jedi stuff maybe more philosophically, maybe more morally, and just kind of straddling the line. And I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't cause a little bit of tension between Cal and Marin. If there's not some, Cal's worried about her touching the dark side too much, and Marin's like, but that's all I do, I am a Night Sister. And we kind of see that yin and yang balance and it get a little heated between the two of them on Kata's training specifically.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. It's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be a major plot point, and there's so many different avenues they could go with this. I like it to like a good template on a canvas, right? Where this masterpiece is, you're watching this masterpiece being drawn, and we have a good outline set here for that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you. And then the last expectation for me is that somebody dies. Grease, Marin, or Cal specifically, out of somebody. There's not anybody else that their death would have enough weight to matter. But this is the end of a trilogy. This is the capstone of the Jedi game story. We know it's a trilogy. We know there may be a fourth game someday, but for now, it's cemented as a trilogy. And so I just think that to add weight to that story, they're going to kill one of those three. And Grease is the lowest hanging fruit for obvious reasons. But Cal or Marin is going to have a lot stronger emotional impact if either of them die.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I don't think they're going to kill a kid. Disney doesn't do anything like that.
Right.
So we can take that one off the table. There's going to be all kinds of characters that are added to this. We're going to get into that in our next little part of this. But you got bad guys. You got whoever their expanded crew might be. They usually add a mechanic or some really suave person somewhere, I bet. I guess that's Grease. But still.
Sure.
Maybe a
or
droid
Turgle.
or something. Yeah.
We're missing Turgle. But that's really, that's a really good point, is that this game, Survivor's ending, leaves us with a really pared down cast. Seer's dead. Kata kind of not replaces Seer, but, fills a gap of now there are 4 people again. And that's kind of it. Like, there's not really any more supporting cast. Like, Turgle exists, but he's more of a joke. Like, fans care more about him than I'm sure the developers do. And so there's not really another character to add to this crew yet. And so we're going to get a whole host of characters. I mean, all of the villains have been handled, other than Darth Vader, who is, like, obvious. That doesn't even count. That is not factored into this story, because we know Vader's fate. And so there's not really anybody that we have, and so the next game is going to be all new. Just like Survivor was pretty much all new. Like, they didn't really bring back any characters or themes from that game, aside from the core crew and Eno Cordova. And it looks like the same thing's going to happen with Survivor, where they're not going to bring anybody over except for the core crew.
Yeah, and it should be that way. I mean, cameos from other characters, stuff like that. I think we're going to talk about that in a minute, too. But it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. And, you can add a droid in there or something, makes a new character. There are some pretty cool ones in this other one, too. Were the ones that were underground and been lost for centuries or something like that. I really like those little side characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we are forgetting BD1. BD1 he's a constant as well.
Yeah. Nothing's
of
going to happen
droid
to
characters.
BD1 either. He's a cool droid. He really is.
Yeah. He sells toys. Nothing's gonna happen. If you sell toys, nothing's gonna happen to you. That's a safe bet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all my expectations. Do you have anything else to cover in the expectation section?
No, I think we got it. I mean, it's going to be a fun Star Wars adventure. That's its own thing. We've said that several times. The stuff I expect. There's going to be a good bad guy. But that's all going to go into what we want. It's all speculation. Another thing I guess they expect is, you had the Zepho in this last one. You had the Old Republic guy turning bad in the second one. And so in the vein of this standing alone as its own story, what we can expect is something out of left field that is so unexpected that we're just going to be enthralled by it somehow. The Zepho idea is fantastic. That Old Republic character and his little henchman, we raved about that in the podcast about Survivor. So, and how fun it was to fight those things. The bad guy and the bosses and the story that goes around it is going to be top notch. Both of these games have, we got the pinnacle of how good and kind hearts and what a good soul that Cal Kestis and Seer and all these characters were. And, juxtaposing that with Marin and how she was discovered in the first game. And so, all of that's going to be on the backdrop of what evil does the Empire come up with now. And it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, it is going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And like you said, Fallen Order and Survivor, the crew is like the only bridge between those two games as far as plot goes. The first game is so heavily leaning into the Zepho and the Inquisitors, and then the second game is heavily leaning into the High Republic stuff, so far as they're the main villain, and then there's a little bit of the Empire with the ISB and with Bode, and now there's a chance that the third game throws another complete wrench, and that there's totally new story, has nothing to do with the first two games. And it worked for Survivor. I think it can work again. I think that would be. I don't know if that's an expectation of mine, but it is something that I would be happy to have happen. The only reason I hesitate to say it's an expectation is that seems like a tall order. Seems like a lot to ask for them to flesh out a third story that is divorced from the other two, but is still satisfying. Because I was already impressed that they did that with Survivor.
Yeah, I mean, and I have faith that they're going to do something on the level too. The Star Wars universe is such a vast tapestry of opportunity. We've joked in private, and I think on the podcast before, when we're dead and gone, they're going to be making stories for hundreds of years in this universe. It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's hop on over to what we want out of this game, because this is a lot of the fanciful, like we can talk about anything. We can throw anything on the wall in the what we want category, because we're not telling anybody, oh, this is going to be in there. This is just something that we think could improve the game or really just would be fun. But I put the very first thing on my list for what we want, I put in here for you and for all PC gamers out there. But constant 60 FPS from day one. So that the frame rate being consistent is really important. Since Survivor had a really bad PC launch, it's pretty important that they get that fixed. And they've got 3 years to do it. I think they know about those problems that they had with Survivor. And so now it's just a matter of ensuring that they're going to be able to maintain a 60 FPS the whole time.
Yeah, that is a big requirement. And there's a lot. Man, you're opening a can of worms talking about that. It wasn't the best as it could be. And my contrast to that would be what if this was a PlayStation Pro exclusive? That was just an announcement. It's like a way higher price tag than you're getting into the PC price tag range, and wouldn't that be funny? Right. Because I know they do these exclusive things, and I'm not a console gamer. I'm making probably a really dumb joke, but yeah, when new games come out, they have much more higher requirements for hardware, and like even the Space Marine game that came out recently, I had an old 1050 graphics card that just didn't cut it, and so they're playable, but it's just like, ooh, I don't want to touch this. It's gross.
Right. It's a real struggle when you see modern games that are performing correctly, and then you go to a game that's not. There's a big change. I mean, it's kind of a whiplash, and so that was a problem with Survivor. It was a big problem with Survivor.
Yeah. But yeah, 60 FPS will be a big deal. I think they can handle it. But it just comes down to the nature of economics. So many more people play consoles, and they all have the same hardware, and it's real easy to program to get the most optimal settings when everybody has the same hardware. And so when you get to the PC world, it's just a whole myriad of obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's to say nothing about 3 years from now. That's not, you're developing a game and trying to predict the future on what kind of specs you're going to need, because this game's going to release on console on the next gen. I mean, the next generation consoles. I don't know if they've been announced or not. I don't know. I don't follow the news near close enough to know that. But I do know that the next console generation is going to come within the next 3 years. And so what are they going to be able? I'm sure they're going to be able to be on that. They're also probably going to be on the old console generation because it's going to be on the line enough, but they're going to have to make sure that it performs on those new consoles. And to the point where, just like other games, it could perform well on the new consoles, and then these older consoles, it just is basically unplayable, as you said, and you have to upgrade to play Jedi 3.
Yeah, I've seen that a couple times over the years. Grand Theft Auto 5 came out for PlayStation 3, and then you could port everything over to the PlayStation 4. And it was an ordeal, to say the least.
Yeah, I can believe that. I can totally believe that it was an ordeal. Yeah, and it looks like I just did a quick little Google search, and it looks like Microsoft has said, we're working on the new console now. So obviously there's going to be a new one. And then there will be a PlayStation 6 too. No idea when they're going to come out, but I'd be willing to bet that around the same time that this Jedi sequel comes out. Yeah. So into the game itself, obviously the FPS is the game, but more into the story and the Star Wars aspects of the game. I think low-hanging fruit, and something that they just did with Survivor that people loved and that more people are going to love if they continue down this road is more lightsaber styles, more ways to customize your lightsaber's look, but more importantly, more ways to play your lightsaber and to really make your character your own. Because I remember playing Survivor with people, and it was super fun and easy to ask somebody, oh, what two styles are you using? Like, how'd you play the game? Like, what? Because they were all playable. There was not a style that was not, that was just garbage, that no one wanted to play it. And so it was fun to ask people, oh, yeah, what were the two lightsaber styles you used to beat the game? And I think that they have a lot of room to grow that and to add more lightsaber styles.
Man, and that was compounded by the different talent trees you had for the styles that you could develop. And so, they added, I think, 2 styles or 3 from the first game. And I hope they keep those styles. Because you got the obvious basic ones, a single lightsaber, dual-bladed, and 2 lightsabers. They added the gun with the lightsaber, and then you added basically the Claymore lightsaber. I don't remember what it's exactly called.
The crossguard. Yeah, the crossguard lightsaber.
And so, I think some examples you used in your notes was what? Shoto?
Like a reverse grip.
Yeah, reverse grip or something like that. There's so much opportunity there. And I agree with you. That was so fun to have conversations with people is what style you're using. And not only that, it provided a totally different gameplay experience.
100%.
You could beat the game with using whatever style you wanted and develop those talent trees and then start the game over, even on the same difficulty or harder, and play with that different style. And it was, or just challenge yourself and do all kinds of different things. And so I remember reading on Reddit or something, all the discussions about the advantage of using this style or that versus this or that. It was so fun to see how people developed it and what they got out of it.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. When we recorded our episode, I think you and I organically had completely different play styles. We didn't set out and be like, all right, one of us is going to play this way and one of us is going to play this way so we can talk about it. We just kind of filtered into the 2 different weapons. Like, you used the gun and lightsaber a lot, if I'm remembering right.
I used that one and the crossguard. It was fun.
Yeah, and I basically never used the gun and lightsaber. I think when it was introduced to me, I used it for that mission, and then I never picked it up again. But I used the crossguard a bunch, and then I used the dual wield constantly. The dual wield was my go-to. I'd loved clearing out the crowds with that. And so it's going to be a lot of fun if they can continue to add that. And I think they can. If you, like you said, we take a look at my notes. Shoto, now I don't know how they do that. That's just a short lightsaber. That just sounds worse. That just is you can't really do anything else. But reverse grip and whip, I can already see how those are both going to be very different. A reverse grip can be a really either fast play style or a dual-oriented play style. And then a whip, that's crowd control, straight up. That's 100%. If they put the light whip in there, it is your crowd control weapon. You keep people 2 feet away from you the entire time.
Yeah. And I can see it, especially when you those talent trees, it'd be so fun what you can do.
Yeah. So that's my hope, is that they saw the success of the lightsaber styles and they'll move in that direction. And in the exact same vein, the customization that they had for Cal with the outfits. Because the first game, this was a huge leap from the first game. Because the first game was just the poncho customization. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's a very unpopular opinion. I hate the poncho. I don't dislike the poncho. I hate the poncho. Yeah. I think it looks dumb. I think that it is a weird aesthetic. Obviously, ponchos belong in Star Wars. They have been there since A New Hope. Luke Skywalker wears a poncho in the first movie. However, that does not need to be some guy's go-to style. It looks weird. And so I never liked the poncho. When they introduced the character customization a lot heavier for Survivor, it was a welcome change. Now, I kept Cal the exact same as the box art as far as his face goes. I didn't change the hair or the facial hair. But I appreciate the fact that people did that, and I'm happy that people had access to that, and they can only ratchet it up from here with new outfits, new haircuts, new beard style, whatever. There's a lot of room to continue to grow that.
Yeah, the character customization is obviously, Star Wars Outlaws didn't have it, and it had some criticism for that.
Mm-hmm.
And, they put Bode in this one, and he wasn't customizable. And we're kind of expecting Marin to have a little bit more role in this one. So, maybe they can have some sort of character swapping thing and have more character customization that way with people who want to focus on Marin a little more or something, or her missions.
Yeah, this isn't something, I can't even say this is a want. Not that I don't want it, but it's like it just came to me with you talking about that. Because this is a different game, really, if they go this direction. But an interesting direction they could go is, like you said, a character swap thing. But really, I mean, lean into that insofar as, you can't complete missions without swapping between the two of them. And Marin is a character at center stage as much as Cal. She has a story at the same level, and you just move fluidly between these two characters. I think the barrier there is they're going to have to develop a really sophisticated AI for when you're not controlling whichever certain character you're controlling, because there's a way for that game to tank really fast if you're not. But some game developer is going to listen to this, and he's just going to be blown away insofar as I am being ridiculous and asking way too much. But he's going to be like, this guy's an idiot. Anyways, what it could lead to is a co-op thing. You could play this as a co-op campaign. Want to use Marin, want to use Cal through the whole game. It'd be a lot of fun. I'm sure that is too taxing on a game developer, on a AAA game developer schedule that they have and what they're trying to crank out for this game. I guarantee you that it is too demanding, but it would be really, really fun.
Yeah, or at least the customization.
Yes, the customization for sure.
That's an easy path, but what you just asked for to be a tall order. It'd be fun too.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be fun. It's not happening. It's not on the want, because I don't want some game developer showing up to my front door, and it's not an expectation for the same reason, but it would be neat. It would be neat. So in the same vein as lightsaber styles, I'm curious if we're going to get a little bit of just the Force combat. That seemed to be a theme with Disney lately. The enlightened Jedi does not use their lightsaber as much. They tried to get that concept across with Ezra. It didn't really land because Ezra starts using a lightsaber in the next episode. But they kind of started getting that across. And so they did a little bit of it in the Acolyte as well. So that's something that I could see with Cal, is not no lightsaber, but another tree of abilities that's just focused on Force combat. That's just focused on, you don't use a lightsaber, and you get some kind of buff when not using a lightsaber in any way. There's some reason that you would go and do that.
Yeah, that's a really fun concept, and I hope a developer is listening to this and puts that in. I mean, because those talent trees are what makes the game replayable and unique and fun in a lot of ways. And, Survivor over Fallen Order had the evolution of Cal's Force abilities and why he could do more stuff. I don't remember if it was in the first game, but I know in this last one, he could yank a stormtrooper towards him and hold him in the air and shoot that blaster minigun with the shield on it at the other stormtroopers. It was such a fun mechanic. And, you couple that with some development philosophies like, we want this character to have this force power and this force power and this force power. And maybe some didn't land and maybe some didn't work exactly like they wanted to. I mean, because if it were, they can't make it 1-to-1 because the enemies would just die too easy and a Jedi would never take any damage, right? Except if they were like at Geonosis and just totally overwhelmed, or some absurd scenario that they're not going to put a game character in without some sort of rescue mechanic where Yoda shows up and saves the day.
Sure.
So what my point is, though, is that evolving the story with Cal becoming more adept at the Force and how that game mechanic translates to usability in the game that's not overpowered. That's a mouthful, but you can tell that these developers considered exactly what I just said that made the game fun and not broken.
No, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's a way to do that. And, you know, they didn't route themselves into a corner. I'm sure they knew what they were doing, but they did such a good job with Survivor. Like, the bar's pretty high after Survivor. I mean, that game was very good, and we gave it a good review for good reason. And it was very popular. And so with Survivor, they did that exactly as you said, where they organically grew Cal's character and grew Cal's story, where he didn't have to go learn the force powers that he learned in Fallen Order because he already knew them, because he's the same person. It's been 5 years. Like, of course you would expect him to know how to move a rock with his mind. The guy's been a Jedi for 5 years. If he can't, that's a problem. And so you start out the game as a more experienced Cal. Well, if we get another 5-year time jump, they're going to have to think up this whole new list of force powers and he's already got the way to lift the guy with the Gatling gun up off the ground. Now, mechanically, they'll teach you how to do it again in the game, but they shouldn't make you go through the trouble of unlocking it again because you didn't have to do that with Fallen Order. And so it'll be interesting to see the evolution of force powers and them being able to balance very powerful force powers versus, you know, where Cal's at in his own force-sensitive Jedi journey. Because we did not get the same Cal in both of the games that are already out. I mean, we got confident Jedi Knight Cal in Jedi Survivor. This guy was not, oh no, I can't remember how to lift things with my mind. Like, the guy was a Jedi in the second game, full-fledged. And so we're going to get a master, essentially, in the next one, is kind of the expectation. At least a very adept Jedi Knight, at the very least. And
or at least on the precipice of being a master.
Yeah, like the game itself is probably him becoming a master. It's probably, I mean, it's Star Wars. It's a trilogy. This is Cal's Return of the Jedi. This is going to make him a master, because Return of the Jedi, Luke's ultimate goal, he had to defeat Vader, and then he would be a Jedi Knight. Well, now Cal's going to have to do something where he's going to be considered a Jedi master in his own mind, in the minds of others. That's going to be an important inflection point for this game.
Yep.
Speaking of combat with the Force, have we considered that Cal might learn himself a little magic from Marin? This one's a little far-fetched. I don't know if I think this is going to happen, but I know it would make for some super fun gameplay.
Yeah, how they interacted in Survivor was really, really fun. You know, she would open a portal or something for him to jump through, and he'd force push off of something, I think. I'd say it's not unreasonable in common parlance of us discussing and having fun. But as far as what's in the game, you know, there could be just some boundaries there that they don't want to cross, you know. But who knows? It'd be fun.
Well, there could be story constraints, really, is also a big... I mean, that's a tall order. Using Night Sister magic is explicitly the dark side. Like, Marin doesn't know any other way but using the dark side. And so there's, you know, for Cal to learn that's kind of like a moral leap that a Jedi, especially a guy who's a Jedi Knight, is not going to be able to take, and for it to kind of square with George Lucas's universe. And so there's I'm sure there's some way to ride around it. There would be a delicate way to get it done if they really wanted to get it done. It's not something I expect. You know, it's in the want category, and it's really just let's think about this. Same as the next one on the list, because this is, I don't know if it's a want or not, because it's kind of, there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons with what I'm about to propose on the We Want section. And that is the ultimate fight being Cal versus Darth Vader, round 2.
Yeah, really, pre-reading the notes on the show on this, you kind of open a can of worms on, I think. And so I want this because of how awesome it could be, but I don't want this because we kind of already know what the end result is, right? And so,
yeah.
With Vader, in the last game, Vader killed Seer, but he took an extreme beating from her before she died, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also subsequently, we've seen Vader run Reva through, and she didn't die. We've seen Obi-Wan versus Vader again in the Inner Rim. That takes place amongst when this game could, right? Or before,
and in the first game,
but
in the first game, we see Cal versus Vader insofar as he's just he's running away the whole time. I mean, the guy can't stand up to Vader in any reasonable way, but it still happens. It's still, they lock lightsabers.
Yeah. So basically as Cal is Seer's student, and facing the guy that killed her, right? I think if they do it right, it could be really, really epic. And especially if it does something like, because Cal's story has to end in this game, at least in some fashion. And so what that says to me is like limbs are getting chopped off. Because we don't want Cal to die. He has a future in this, but he can't beat Vader, right? He could beat him. Right. He could beat him in an esoteric sense, like Obi-Wan did and like Seer did.
Yes,
but only at some great cost to himself or what his end goal is. So,
right, and virtually no cost to Vader. I mean, Vader can be down. He can be, immobile. He can be, all of these things. He can't die, and he's going to have to revert back to A New Hope Vader, which is just Darth Vader. So there's no way that Cal can confront this character and cause any form of lasting damage. There's just no way. But like you said, Cal has to receive very lasting damage if he goes toe-to-toe with Vader. Because Seer, I don't expect Cal to be on Seer's level in this next game. Seer's a Jedi Master of the Old Order. I mean, she was a master in the Old Order. She wasn't just a knight. And so she stood up to Vader and still just basically got her ass kicked. And so there's not really any way that I can expect Cal to be able to go toe-to-toe with Vader without some external force helping him along the way.
Yeah. But my overall point is that it's just my gut instinct reaction, and I perfectly feel willing to have a discussion about it, is it cheapens Vader's story. Is that every time he runs across somebody, it's getting to be kind of a silly trope in a lot of Disney Star Wars, is that people getting touched by lightsabers don't die. They don't lose limbs. They get run through and they're okay at the end. Because you had, what's her name? You had Reva. It happened to Reva. It happened to the Grand Inquisitor. It happened to
Sabine.
Sabine. And then so,
which I defend. The only one I defend is Sabine's. I don't think that.
Well,
she got stabbed in an obvious part of her body where a normal human being goes to a hospital, they're going to live. And I was convinced by Sabine.
That's the trope. Hurt a character and they don't die spot in every movie ever. It's either the shoulder or that part of the abdomen. And so, that's fine. It's good storytelling in a sense, as long as it's not gratuitous. And like I said, we can have this discussion, but more in the Vader aspect of it. This guy's supposed to be an unstoppable badass, and we can't have our heroes lose. Luke is the final say on what happens to Vader, and so going into these fights, knowing what the outcome is kind of not fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was cool to see Vader go against Seer. And I was happy that he showed up in Survivor because that fight was so fun, but it gets tiring. And again, like you said, where you see Vader, you're like, oh, Seer died. It's like before she ever dies, before you finish the fight, you're like, oh, she dies. Like the end of this fight, which is super fun, is going to be that Seer is dead. There's no other option. That bookshelf drops on Vader. It's smoldering fire, yada, yada. No one is faked out at all. None of us are like, oh, dang, Vader died. No, we know he's coming back and he's going to kill Seer.
He's got his fire resistance is too you can't hurt him with fire.
Exactly. He's basically a water type Pokemon. But Vader also, like you said, has kind of become this tool of Disney Star Wars to be just the shock factor. I mean, spoilers for Outlaws. I'll give the warning because the game hadn't even been out a month yet. But Vader shows up in Star Wars Outlaws. He's there. He's there for a little while, but he's there. And it's not satisfying that he's there. You're not threatened. He does something cool in it, but it's like, why did we have to include Darth Vader in the Underworld game? Like we've already had multiple OT cameos in the game, in Star Wars Outlaws itself. Why does Vader have to show up?
And juxtapose that with Survivor, where when he showed up in that game, it was a total twist. You had, common folk who like to play this game. They didn't know what Nur was, and they just knew the Inquisitors were bad guys, but they didn't know Vader was their boss, per se. And so when he showed up in that game, and between the music and how it played out, it was a harrowing experience that struck fear even to the most diehard fans. Like, they probably, I'm sure in the writer's room for this game, they told with the idea of just ending the game that way. That would have been unsatisfying and stupid, but they at least had the discussion. And so, but it made you scared that Vader was in this game and your character was in extreme peril. That didn't occur in Fallen Order, right? I got the game names confused. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it didn't occur in Survivor. You're right. Yeah.
So,
well, it did. I'll say I was surprised by Vader's inclusion in Survivor, but I wasn't. It wasn't the same as Fallen Order. Fallen Order is this penultimate surprise villain, and the Star Wars of Jedi Fallen Order in the real world is different than the Star Wars of Jedi 3, because Jedi Fallen Order came out 2 months before The Rise of Skywalker and The Mandalorian. So we had never had a Star Wars TV show live action before, ever, when Jedi Fallen Order came out. Darth Vader had only been a villain in the original trilogy. He shows up in Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One and Rebels. And that's it. And that's a lot-ish, but Vader is not felt overused by the time of Fallen Order. By the time of Survivor, Vader is getting there. It's like, all right, didn't Obi-Wan just come out? Like, there's a couple things going on here where we see Vader and we're like, this is fine. Vader's a cool villain. Understand it. Going to be a good fight. There's no other red lightsaber wielding Force user in the galaxy who's going to be able to give Seer a run for her money. And so we got to get the big guy out again. But the Star Wars of whenever Jedi 3 comes out, probably 2027, 2028, are we really going to want to see Darth Vader again? Like, is that really what we're going to want to see? Is Vader another time? And so, I included Cal versus Vader in the what we want section so we could have this discussion. But we kind of came to the conclusion that I expected, and that was that Vader is not really going to be a welcome character in the third game. For me, and I assume for you. It would be neat. I'm not going to say if it happens that the game is unplayable or terrible or ruins Star Wars or anything like that. But it's just not the direction that I think fans really want to see. I think people want to see Darth Vader take a little bit of a breather.
Yeah. And I think this spurns to the discussion, and Vader's the biggest representation of who's going to be the big bad in this, who we want to be the big bad, if we can frame it that way. I mean, and Vader's the lowest hanging fruit for that because he had that conflict with Seer, and there's always going to be that something sitting in the back of Cal's mind of wanting to avenge his master's death, right?
Yeah.
But even then, like I said earlier, whoever the big bad is going to be could be telling somebody we don't have any idea. When Fallen Order came, sorry, I get the names confused in my head too easy. Survivor came out. We had no idea that it was going to be Tanalor and all this other stuff. It was totally out of. We had lots of discussion as who was in that tank, right? And then I think right before the game came out, it had some more reveals on that stuff, and we're just blown away. I'm really hoping for that in this one, and we can say the Empire will play a role, whether or not I think the choices is either some sort of Imperial threat, like Outlaws. It had an Imperial threat we've never seen before, the Zarabesh or whatever. And it was a pretty cool little villain. So it's not out of the wheelhouse to say that some sort of Imperial effort as being the big bad in this. Them evolving into some sort of rebel, into some more rebel cell, right, like we talked about.
I agree, especially with Survivor giving us kind of a breather of the Empire being the villain. Like, the ISB was still around. Bode worked for the Empire. The Empire's a villain in that game. I'm not going to say they're not, but they're not the chief villain. It's obvious that the High Republic folks are the chief villains in that game. And so I think that, like you said, Vader's the lowest hanging fruit. You could do something fun with the Grand Inquisitor, but the same problem is we know how the Grand Inquisitor dies. He dies in the season finale of Rebels. Kanan and Ezra kill him. There's Cal is not going to be able to deliver that death blow, and so that's unsatisfying a little bit. There's always going to be an element of not being satisfying there.
There has to be some stakes on the line that have grand repercussions, at least for the characters involved in this.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting. It'll almost certainly be a bespoke villain, though.
And so whoever this is going to be a monumental or Herculean trial for Cal Kestis in this. And I think we already established that earlier in that this is the master's trial for Cal.
Yep, I'd agree with you. So as far as like the story goes and the direction that we're thinking, there's a lot of different ways it could go. It's possible that they could bring back the Zepho from Fallen Order, because that is just totally like hanging in the wind. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's not like the Zepho have to be addressed, but there could always be that element of the story built back into it. There could always be a big Sith presence. We could, and on a giant way out there limb, maybe Cal's group finds out more about Exegol than anybody else ever had before. Finds out more about really how the Sith are controlling the galaxy right now than anybody had before. Because when you get Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, he still does not have the full picture of the Sith ruling the galaxy. He understands that the Sith are ruling the galaxy. He doesn't really know what that means. And so you could have Cal kind of stumble on that thread. There's a lot of directions that could go. And a big Sith presence could be a lot of fun. Something that we've never really seen before. I guess we saw it in the Clone Wars in the Yoda arc. But is like excavating and spelunking an old Sith temple. We've only ever seen old Jedi temples. And so with the way that platformer works, it could be really satisfying to go into this really dark Sith temple place and play up the vibe of, this mysterious energy and Cal struggling with the dark side while he's there. There could be a lot of fun stuff to do with making the Sith a big presence in this game.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The game is definitely going to be that whole platformer aspect, and that's a lot of what makes the game what it is. And it's a lot of fun figuring out those puzzles, especially streaming it. I know we had a lot of struggles and a bunch of elation when those puzzles were accomplished. It was great, and having that spin on it would be very satisfying.
Right, because they have to figure out the puzzle spin. The first game was the Zepho. The next game was the High Republic. They've got to have some kind of puzzle spin. I'm not saying they can't go back to the well and hit one of those two things again, but just with the cadence they've already established, it feels like they'll go in a new direction. And so the Sith seem to me to be a more low-hanging fruit than other options. Seer, she's gone, she's dead. I do kind of expect her to still play a role in this game, though. I bet we're gonna get some like old hollows of her, very similar to how Cordova left those of BD1. I think that we're just gonna see that character pop up again. And the reason I thought about this, put it in the notes, is because I was like, could Seer come back as a Force ghost? And then I was immediately like, oh no, she can't do that. And so what's kind of that? What's gonna happen there? How's that gonna be? Because we often talk about Padawan lines and Padawan lineages and stuff. And you have, the obvious, clear, ultimate one, Yoda to Dooku to Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan to Anakin to Luke. But there's other important ones like Mace Windu into Depa Billaba, into Kanan, into Ezra, and then further down on the line, probably into Jacen Syndulla. And so we kind of have a little bit of a thread. We have Eno Cordova, we have Seer, and then we have Cal, and then almost certainly we'll have Kata. And I don't know if she's going to be a Padawan or not, but she's going to be in that Force lineage. And so it's like, how does she connect with that Force lineage? Well, Seer can't show up to her as a ghost, but Cal can certainly show her some old training footage of Seer or something like that. So I'm not expecting her to be totally out of the game. I'm just expecting her to be a little bit of a cameo.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be surprised if there's something like, Hu Yang had all of Anakin's training tapes that he was showing Ahsoka. And that was such a fun deal. And, Seer, she wasn't some big fighter. She was certainly capable, but she was a lot more on the wisdom side of this that Cal Kestis really needed. And, now we're talking about it, that Kata's going to really need too. She's in really dire straits here.
Yeah, no, she absolutely is. And that's a worthwhile discussion of what kind of Jedi Master is Cal going to be? Is he going to be wizened like Seer and Qui-Gon Jinn? Is he going to be a diplomat like Obi-Wan Kenobi? Not that there's that much of a capacity for Jedi diplomats during this time period. But that, there's going to be an identity that Cal is going to project. And there's a danger that he can turn into Kanan. And I love Kanan's character. I mean, nobody loves Kanan Jarrus's character more than me. But we don't want another, because that cheapens Kanan's story. That cheapens him, realizing that he's enough to be a master and realizing that he has enough potential to teach somebody else. And that's certainly going to be something Cal struggles with, and he needs to struggle with that. But that defined Kanan. That was Kanan's entire story arc. And so we can't have that for Cal. So Cal's going to have to forge it doesn't have to be a new path, but it's going to have to be a unique enough path to be satisfying on what kind of Jedi Master this guy is going to be.
Yeah, and that's going to be a huge conundrum, even to speculate about. I mean, in the interest of drawing a contrast with what you just said, he would have to be like a headstrong. We're going to take this responsibility on head on. But then my next question is, for what purpose? I think we already discussed, that was the whole first effort of the game is of the first game was, we have this holocron, let's start this Jedi Order back up. And by the end of the game, it's like, it's too dangerous. These people need to live their own lives. And so there's that conflict of what happened in the first game versus his responsibility now in this third game. And so doing that balancing act with creating a unique story is going to be a real challenge. I kind of hope he does take that head on. If not for the purpose of starting a new Jedi Order, maybe for the purpose of, heck, just being a good dad, Yeah. They've already lost, he lost a big part of his family unit, and strengthening that family unit is a very positive and worthwhile endeavor that stands alone as itself without some macro perspective of furthering the cause of at this point, a long lost Jedi Order.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that Cal, like you used the word dad, stepping into this fatherly role for Kata is going to be super important to his character. We put that in the expectations because that's, we don't want our heroes to just kick this kid to the curb. That is not compelling story. They wouldn't, as the Cal that we know would not do that. And so he's going to adopt that role as a surrogate father. And just as Marin is almost certainly going to adopt this role as a surrogate mother to Kata. And so we're going to need from both characters this like commitment to her safety that could lead to what you're talking about. Like them knowing how dangerous it is to be in this galaxy. They made the willful decision not to go get other Force users because they didn't want them to be their responsibility. They didn't want to put them in jeopardy, but now they're forced into doing it. Now they have to do it because they've got this kid. Nobody else in the galaxy even knows she exists. And so how are they going to take this responsibility? And from a gameplay perspective, from an interesting story perspective, it almost has to be that they're going to train her, like we've already talked about. And so that is seeing Cal and Marin playing off of each other and going, headstrong, super hard into training Kata, I think is the lowest hanging fruit and would be a lot of fun. And it gives us something else that I really want, and that is a source of growth for the Cal and Marin romance. If they're playing this role of father and mother to this little girl, then I think naturally we're going to see their characters kind of grow in that direction, grow in a more romantic way, and grow between the two of them. Because as we talked about in our Valentine's Day episode, Star Wars has got a love problem right now. I mean, we don't get any love stories out of Star Wars. We haven't in a couple of years now. The Rise of Skywalker was like the last thing.
And I think what we said back then was this has the most potential.
Yes,
something that we're interested in seeing.
No, I agree. I think this is kind of it on the potential. This is the only romance that Star Wars has going for it right now. And so seeing them just double, triple down on that and make that a big part of this game would be very satisfying. I would really like to see that happen. And that does not mean that they can't have those struggles and disagreements about Kata's tutelage that we talked about in the expectations. That actually probably means that it's going to happen and they're going to be more passionate about it. And that their fights are going to be more passionate because they're caring for this girl like parents and they're treating each other like parents. And that's an important aspect to this story. I really would like to see that. with Uncle Grease tagging along, basically, or
Right.
Grandpa Grease. Because we haven't really mentioned him, and I don't know. We haven't mentioned him because I don't really know what's going to happen with Grease. The guy, he went from being this gambling addict pilot to owning a saloon in the second game. So who knows what's going to happen with this guy in the third game?
He felt kind of sidelined in the second game, so
he did.
Maybe
he
he'll play
definitely
more of a role in this one. I kind of got on a limb. I hope there is kind of somewhat-ish rebel-centric with an Empire thing, because he'll have a real bone to pick with those guys, and something fun will develop from that, of him being fanatical or doing this or that with reaching whatever his end goal is.
Right. I think we're certainly going to get Tanalorr back, and I want Tanalorr to play a titular role in the story because it's such a unique place. It's this hidden place. The Empire doesn't know about it. Safe haven. They could theoretically just not do anything. Theoretically, there could never be a third game, because what's the reason that Cal, Marin, and Kata ever leave Tanalorr? Now
it's a
there's going to be
Garden of Eden.
Exactly. Now there's going to be a reason. Obviously, there's a third game. But unless Tanalorr gets blown up or invaded by the Empire or discovered in the interim, which would, I think, probably be unsatisfying, Tanalorr is going to have to play a pivotal role in the story, because the characters are, it's introduced a concept of where the characters are always going to have a safe haven to run back to. And so there's going to have to be some jeopardizing of safety on Tanalorr, or getting everyone to Tanalorr, or establishing a rebel base on Tanalorr, that something goes sideways with Tanalorr, but it's going to be a part of the story. And so, Survivor visited like all new planets for its game. I don't think Jedi 3 can do that. I think Jedi 3 has to include Tanalorr and Kobo. Like, those are both probably going to certainly have to exist. Kobo, because it has Grease's saloon, and it is the gateway to Tanalorr. And so why would you include Tanalorr and then just continuously bypass this planet, especially when the assets already exist? It kind of feels like they could just load it in there. Again, I'm not a game developer. Game developers probably listen to these podcasts and they're like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But anyways.
We want Kobo back just because it's the Texas planet. We love that one.
Well, yeah. I want more planets like Kobo in general. I mean, it was huge. It had a sprawling map. There were all these areas. It had its own little ecosystem. It's like Outlaws did a super good job about fleshing out all 4 of the planets in that game. And Kobo was like the only one that Survivor did that way. I mean, Coruscant, famously, that was like the big letdown of Survivor for a lot of fans, was that Coruscant was billed as being a part of the game, and then it's this really stilted one mission on rails part of the game, where it's like you can't go anywhere except where this game is telling you to go on Coruscant. And Kobo was just not that way. In an action-adventure game where they don't have to give you open world. Jedi Survivor's not an open world game, and it doesn't need to be an open world game. But they gave you a taste of that with Kobo, and I'd like to see some more sprawling maps like that for a couple other planets. Tanalorr specifically. I mean, it'd be awesome to get to explore Tanalorr like that.
Right. Yeah, so it would.
So I really hope Tanalorr plays a titular role in the story, and I hope that we get those big sprawling maps like Kobo. And then really the one of the last things I want to talk about is all of the other successes bringing over from Survivor. Survivor introduced a lot of stuff that was all really successful. We talked about lightsaber fights. We talked about customization. We talked about the sprawling maps. But Survivor offered some side missions that were like way more compelling than anything that you needed to do in Fallen Order. Fallen Order didn't really have side missions, but exactly. The Bounty Hunter side mission for Survivor's basically a different story. It's its own little isolated story with a very satisfying payoff and very satisfying cameo at the end. And so something else like that really needs to happen.
Yep.
And then finally, and in the same vein of that Bounty Hunter deal, because the satisfying payoff to the Bounty Hunter side mission is Boba Fett shows up at the end. Boba Fett's the last bounty hunter that you've got to confront. And it's a lot of fun. It's super neat getting to see that happen. But in that same vein, original trilogy cameos, I mean, that's a want and an expectation insofar as we know there's going to be something. We just don't know who it's going to be. And I've got a crazy one that I'm about to throw out there that is, you are never going to see this one coming. You're going to be like, why did he think of that? I want to see, of any character from the original trilogy, Garinden. the Kubaz spy from A New Hope that rats out the fact that the Millennium Falcon is in that docking bay, because I think that Garindin has had a cameo opportunity like dozens of times and he's never come up, and people forget about this guy, and I think that he deserves to be in this game. So
yeah, that's
I'm saying Garindin. But no, there's a lot of low-hanging OT cameo fruit.
Yeah. I mean, the lowest hanging fruits are any of the trio, right? I mean, gosh, you imagine how cool it'd be for well, I don't guess he can. He can't run into Luke, right?
No, Luke is the one that is impossible, essentially.
Yeah.
Luke is, because he's still just kicking it on Tatooine. Like, there's no reason that he would run into Luke unless we go to Tatooine, and then it's like you run into some random teenager in a market. Like, there's no, this guy's not special.
It's not going to be impactful to the story, but like somehow Chewbacca and Han Solo could be, you go do a trade with them, or they give you a ride somewhere or something.
Well, I think that's a good one for a few reasons. One of them is that you look at Rebels. Rebels had a ton of OT cameos. Leia's in Rebels, Lando's in Rebels, Luke is even in Rebels. And
Hondo.
so Hondo, Hondo's in Rebels, a little different there, but yeah, Hondo's in Rebels. And so we get a lot of people in Rebels, but we never get Han Solo and Chewbacca in Rebels. We get Wedge Antilles and Mon Mothma. We never get Han Solo or Chewbacca. And so Han Solo and Chewbacca showing up could be kind of Jedi Survivors thing. Like, you're just doing some underworld deal, and it'll be a really good look at like grizzled, out for himself scoundrel Han. Like, I would love, honestly, if Han kind of backstabs you, not in an over the top, like he's really evil kind of way, but in a way where he like screws you over and leaves you holding the bag.
Yeah,
that would be
the cargo and off he goes.
Exactly. That would be a satisfying way to include Han Solo and Chewbacca in this, because after Solo, he's going to only be out for himself. He and Chewie are the only two people he cares about in the galaxy. What's this stupid little rebellion to him? What's this Jedi thing to him? He doesn't even know what that is. It could give him kind of the jaded lines that he delivers in A New Hope about the Force. The experience with Cal could reinforce that. Something that happens with Cal makes him feel that way.
Or premonition type scenes would be fun.
Yes. And so that would, I think right there, a Han Solo and Chewbacca and cameo is probably the lowest hanging fruit. Leia's possible, especially in the light of the rebellion. The closer we get in time to A New Hope, the likelier it is that she can show up. But her cameo will be the same as in Rebels. If she shows up, it's going to be, I'm a young teenager who's actually secretly working for the rebellion, but everyone thinks I'm a senator for the Empire. It'll just, it'll be some espionage thing, which is not bad. That's just how it'll be. Lando is low hanging fruit just because he's easy to throw in there, but not. I would welcome a Lando cameo. There's no problem with it, but I would welcome more a Han Solo and Chewbacca cameo, and those two can pretty much fill the same role as far as a cameo goes.
I mean, there's other stuff to talk about too, like a Rogue One character or Andor character. Something that's not too far out of left field. Obviously they're going to get more traction out of an OT character, but something like that, Luthen Rail showing up would be off the hook cool.
That would be super cool. Get Stellan Skarsgård in the sound booth. That would be really neat.
Yeah, very cool.
And then like Tarkin, we don't know what the Imperial villains are going to be like in this, and so there's reason to believe that Tarkin or Krennic could show up. Either one of them would be fun to see. It just kind of depends on the direction that they take the Empire. If those two make any sense or not.
And again, I want to reiterate, there's got to be some consequences for whatever the villain is. So.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, like, it could be one of these guys, but we know how the story ends, and I don't want that.
Yeah, well, that's why I included them in cameo. Like, they would be in the same level as Boba Fett was in Survivor. Like, they show up, they're there for whatever reason, and then they leave. You get arrested by some Imperials, and you're in an office, and Tarkin is like questioning you and leaves. There's not, you can't have any kind of confrontation with these people. But yeah, there's some low hanging fruit. We just don't know what direction they're going to take the cameos, but we know there's going to be some, just because there have been in all the others.
And they'll pay off and be worthwhile. The developers are so good at this.
Yes, yeah, they will make them meaningful for sure. We know that they will. We can be confident in that. Anything else on your wants, man? I mean, this was a good list. I think with
Really?
it, we've chewed through a lot of wants and expectations, and the little bit that
Really,
we know.
Yeah, I think we nailed it. The stories are so good. The history on these is impeccable for the last two games. There's no reason to doubt that that the games are going to have any lack of the same effort. Especially because the games made money. The people that make the game are unconstrained. They're allowed to make their own story without any. They have reasonable boundaries, I'm sure. No main characters aren't going to die or die in gruesome ways or something like that. But being like Tanalor, nobody saw that coming. Zepho, nobody saw that coming. Stuff like that, and all those elements around that are just so exceedingly fun and interesting and cool that whatever they do come up with is just going to be the same level of quality. So.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I'm confident in this team. I'm confident in Respawn. I think that they're going to make another good game. They have totally earned the trust and respect of Star Wars gaming fans, of Star Wars gamers. Fallen Order was a big surprise. People really liked that game a lot. And then Survivor came and dashed it to the side. I mean, it outshined Fallen Order by a ton. And so if they can do that a third time, I'll be very, very impressed. And I hope that happens. I'd like to see something like that happen.
Yep.
So that wraps up the meat of the podcast, but we got plenty more podcasts to go. So, Colin, why don't we head on over to the How the Force Works question?
That's not how the Force works.
All right, Colin, so this is our Patreon-powered segment where we talk, we get questions live from our Patreon subscribers, and we answer them here on the show. They go to the Patreon, submit them for $1, and then we get rolling, and we answer their questions. And so this one was a really fun question. This one comes from Patreon subscriber Tristan. And he asks, what real-life Star Wars location do you want to visit? And by this, he means filming location. Where they filmed one of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, so this one is too easy for me. I've talked about this, I hope, dozens of times. But it's Villa, let me pronounce this right, Villa Balabineo at Lake Como in northern Italy. I hoodwinked my wife into agreeing to do a vow renewal there, and of course I told her right after what she agreed to, but it was just a fun joke. But yeah, bucket list location for me has to be. And for anyone, so if you don't know, that's where Padme and Anakin got married on Naboo. It's the real life Padme's vacation home, and well, not real life. I'm getting confused here. It's the real life setting of where that was filmed for Padme's vacation home. That when Anakin is looking after her guarding her from assassins, is where they go and fall in love.
Yes.
And so I love that story. Love the whole aspect of it. And that's where it culminated of them getting married, of them standing on that walkway with the cameras viewing the lake out there. Some of the most beautiful scenery on the planet is there, and it directly ties into one of the best stories of Star Wars. That's my bucket list and my answer to this question. Great question.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is you hit it. It's Lake Como is not just this Titanic Star Wars destination. It's like this just beautiful place on Earth. Like it's a normal vacation destination, and if you're a Star Wars fan, you get this extra level to it. And so that's a perfect answer. That's a really good answer. I got two. I couldn't decide on one. The first one is another Naboo location. This one is Theed. So this one is the Plaza de España in Sevilla, Spain. And so this is where they just get a bunch of wide shots of what Theed looks like. The place actually looks like Theed. It's really beautiful. The reason it's on the list for me is because I missed out on doing this. The undergraduate university that I went to has a campus in Sevilla, Spain. It's not just a study abroad program. They literally have a campus that is owned by the university there, and I did not take the study abroad. And I think I didn't do it because I didn't know that the Plaza de España was themed, because I almost certainly would have gone knowing that. Oh, no, I already want to go to Spain. I'd already love to visit, and spending, a semester there would have been awesome. But compounding it with the fact that it's a Star Wars location, I couldn't imagine that I would have turned it down had I known. So that one's on there. And then as I was doing research to answer this question, I want you, if you're listening to this, Colin, I want you to do this. I want everybody, unless you're driving, don't do this if you're driving. But if you're not driving, get your phone out and Google Guilin, China. Guilin. This is the real world filming location for Kashyyyk. So just go to Google Images and look at the picture of this place. I didn't know I wanted to go to this place before like 2 hours ago. But now I want to go to Guilin, China so bad. This place is gorgeous looking. I can't believe that a place like this exists on Earth. As far as how cool and picturesque this place is. So that one is also now on the list as I was doing research for, all the places that they filmed. It's not like I don't really want to go to Tunisia that bad. I'd like to go to Tunisia and stay in Luke Skywalker's house hotel, but I got to have another reason to go to Tunisia other than that. But Guilin, China, it rocketed up on my vacation destination list after looking at these pictures.
That place looks amazing.
Yeah, it's
really
pretty stunning. I thought Kashyyyk was all CGI, and it's still mostly CGI. But to know that they filmed some of the stuff here, that this was the location, really, really impressive stuff, because it is gorgeous there. I can't believe how it looks. And I didn't actually look in what part of China it's in, but it's in a relatively rural part of China, from what I understand, which is just a whole other can of interesting worms. It's in like southern China. I would call it southern China. I don't know if they consider that southern China or not, but I would say it's in southern China. But it's in all that big forested area. It's not even close to the Mongolian desert or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
just scrolling through the images on Google make it look like world-class destination. The flight's not cheap to get there, though.
Oh, certainly not. I'm sure it's not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see the tag right there. For me right now, if I wanted to leave tomorrow, it would take me 2 days to get there, and it would cost me $4,000.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, that's just the airline tickets.
Yeah, that is just the plane ride. But it's a really picturesque looking place. It looks pretty neat. So that's my answer. And great question, Tristan. And we, if you're a Patreon subscriber or you've been a longtime listener, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Star Wars Station. And ask us a question over there. It's at the $1 tier is when you can start asking questions. And so we would love to hear questions from you guys, answer them here on the show. They can be any kind of question you want. And this was a great question. This was a really, really wonderful one. So we appreciate the question, Tristan. Now, Colin, we got some more to talk about. Let's head on over to the HoloNet news.
You made the HoloNet.
So, we got 3 news stories like normal. I want to dive into the first one, like dive head first into it, because I saw this headline and I was like, what is going on? This show or movie or whatever the hell it is just continues to pop up in Star Wars news, and it seems that nobody knows anything about it. Everyone reporting about it seems to have no idea what's going on. Everybody involved with it seems to have no idea what's going on, because Donald Glover, as of about a week and a half ago, said that he is working on the Lando series, and that he thinks Star Wars is too serious, and that he wants to make Star Wars fun. Now, whatever that means, I don't know. I can't even venture to imagine what Donald Glover thinks about that and what making Star Wars more fun means. But the part about this news story we need to talk about is we reported like 2 months ago that Lando was canceled. That Donald Glover's brother, I think, was the guy who was helping him write this, and he was like, it's not happening anymore. We're done. It's completely off of Disney's radar. It's canceled. But now Donald Glover says it's happening and that he's still working on it. So I'm just super confused.
Yeah, I thought it was a different director or something, or writer who had been let go or something. I don't remember the exact details, but he had, whoever that person was, and I'm looking it up here, he had made some sort of TV show that didn't do well,
and so I think he got the axe for that. But what this strikes me as is that the Lando Star Wars is too serious. Between Donald Glover and what he brings to the table and what the Lando character is, there's a lot of opportunity for Lando to be serious, especially involved in the Rebels. But between the Solo movie and A New Hope, there's a lot of time that passes, and so something Lando gallivanting around the galaxy, getting up to some chicanery or antics, from the mind of Donald Glover, is something I'm super looking forward to.
No, it is something I'm looking forward to. And it looks like to me, Stephen Glover, Donald Glover's brother, obviously, was the one that originally said it wasn't happening. But now Donald Glover, so the most curious thing about this is Donald Glover answered all of this in an interview with the Wall Street Journal. And Donald Glover brought it up himself. They didn't ask him, hey, what about the Lando thing? He started talking about it. Donald Glover was just talking about, I cannot wait to work on Lando with my brother. It's going to be awesome, blah, blah, blah. Lando's going to be great. It came out of nowhere, came out of left field. And so I'm really, really curious about how this happened. With him bringing it up himself, it even feels like that feels more sure to me than anything else we've heard. Because if Donald Glover's going to go out there on a limb and be like, oh, yeah, this is happening, I'm pumped about it, yada, yada, well, he must know something that we don't about the show. So yeah, I'm back on the I hope Lando happens train.
Yeah, I Googled it. It was a director named Justin Simeon. He previously made Haunted Mansion in 2023 and a movie called Dear White People, and I think a different version of it in 2014 and 2017. And there's a lot to say about that I don't know necessarily want to get into, but that Haunted Mansion didn't do well. I saw it and it was kind of silly, but it I don't know how much that guy brought to the table that Disney and Lucasfilm was wanting to point that direction with the Lando story.
So that guy got axed, but Lando didn't get axed, is what you're saying.
That's
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Cool. Well, that guy's comments, I know we reported it as him saying Lando was done. The guy's comments made it seem like Lando was done. And I'm not gonna go out and say, oh, Lando is happening for sure, because all we've heard is tons of conflicting news. It's a TV show, it's a movie, it's happening, it's not. Glover's excited about it. Glover hasn't heard about it. Like we've heard so many things about it. If someone told me I had to bet money on it, I would say that it's not going to happen.
And we've been talking about it since 2020. I mean, this podcast hadn't been around that long, but me and you, I remember talking about it the first time we heard about that and how excited we were for it. So, I mean, this is 4 years. Man, there's movies that they call it development hell or something like that. There's movies that I've heard of that never get made, especially if you start peeling back the layers on book series that should be made into movies. There's one TV show I like called The Drew Carey Show. There's so many movies. Our favorites, Seinfeld. They've syndicated that on TV and on streaming, and Friends and The Office and Breaking Bad, all this other stuff. But the Drew Carey Show hasn't been on because of some music rights conflict of somebody who owns rights to the TV show somehow. And I heard the other day that it's only after like 20 years from that thing was last broadcast. I might be exaggerating just a tad, but it's an extreme amount of time that you would think normally that show is finally being put into streaming offerings. And so, there's a lot of talk about bureaucracy here and there, but the Hollywood bureaucracy and red tape is just as bad, it sounds like sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does sound like that. It absolutely sounds like that. And like you said, there's a myriad of reasons that stuff like that happens. My Star Wars moment of the week is actually going to talk about a movie that was delayed for a couple years for reasons like that. And so it happens a lot. And we're seeing, though, more commonly out of Lucasfilm that when those movies get thrust into development hell, that it's over, that it's a done deal. I can't really think of anything that Lucasfilm has put into development that wasn't on a good track the whole time that got made. I can't think of. It's not like Andor got shelved for a couple years and then got made. And it's not like Skeleton Crew or really anything that they've released. Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Book of Boba Fett may be the most prominent, and those just took a while, from what I understand. They did. I guess the Book of Boba Fett's probably the one that was most likely a candidate for development hell. They went through a lot of writers and a lot of directors before they kind of cemented where that they wanted that to go. It probably wouldn't have even happened without the success of The Mandalorian. And so that one's probably the only one that I think ended up seeing the light of day after taking forever to get going.
Right.
So, Colin, we've got 2 more news stories to go. The next one is video game related, talking about Star Wars Outlaws, and it is not good news. It is that Star Wars Outlaws is projected to sell 5.5 million copies by March 2025, and that is way lower than they anticipated, and that because of this, Ubisoft's stock hit a 10-year low, falling 12.5%.
Yeah, and it's not just Outlaws. I think their Assassin's Creed game has. I don't even want to say I don't know anything about Assassin's Creed. I just know it pops up on my feeds here and there. There's a lot of discussion about it. Some people upset, some people not, and whatever it is, it translates to low sales. And there's a whole number of reasons that we could have a really long discussion. I'm pretty sure we covered in our podcast episodes about Outlaws. So, happy to hash that out when and however you want.
Sure. But it's disappointing to see. We always want Star Wars to be successful. And it's just interesting that we would see such a drop off. I mean, Jedi Survivor's been out a year and some change, and it sold 55% better than Star Wars Outlaws. And the main selling point for any Star Wars game is the label Star Wars. I mean, that is, if you are a marketing person at any game developer anywhere in the country, your number one selling point for your game is going to be the words Star Wars. Like, there's just no, I mean, if someone just looks at a game and it has the title Star Wars, there's a chance they're going to buy it if they're any amount of a fan. And Star Wars games used to basically just print money. I mean, they used to just sell like hotcakes. 2005, go look at all the best Star Wars games you can think of. They actually came out between 2004 and 2006. Really small window where I can guarantee you, if you're thinking about a top 5 Star Wars game, at least 3 of them came out in those years. And so Star Wars games used to be able to where you could have 3 a year, and they all sold like hotcakes. And gaming is very different now. I am not saying 20 years down the road that our picture of gaming is the same as it used to be, and that you could even expect for there to be 3 successful Star Wars games in a year in 2024. That's probably never going to happen again. But it's not unreasonable to expect every year you get a successful Star Wars game because of the title Star Wars, and that's not happening. A 55% drop is a massive drop. It's nearly the same kind of drop we saw with the Acolyte's viewership versus other Star Wars TV shows. And these 2 things came out around the same time. They came out this year, and we're seeing a marked dip in interest in the franchise right now. And Star Wars is going to have to figure out how to recoup there. I think they're course correcting somewhat already. They've gone out and said, we're going to make less TV shows, which I think is the answer. We've talked a lot about quality over quantity with Star Wars and how important that is, how important breaks are with Star Wars. And so this isn't like they've killed all the goodwill in the world surrounding Star Wars. But a couple bad drops in a row begins to be a problem. And Outlaws is kind of showing that if people continue to lose interest in Star Wars, it's going to be harder and harder to get that interest back. They need something. The Mandalorian and Grogu movie needs to be successful, basically. It's really kind of the bottom line of this entire filibuster here is no matter how good Andor Season 2 is or Ahsoka Season 2 is, they've got to figure out a way to get people really hooked back onto Star Wars and to have high expectations for Star Wars. And one of those ways, aside from just consistently good releases and having good video games and having good TV shows, is going to be a big blockbuster movie like The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yeah, I'll echo exactly what you just said. The article we're reading this from goes into a lot of reasons why they think it is why. I don't necessarily agree with all those. To me, what it all boils down to is quality. I think what our criticisms of the Acolyte speak for themselves. We don't need to rehash that. And the big thing for Outlaws was it had some really steep barriers right at the start that just didn't make it fun. Especially a couple weeks on for me, it was like, why am I playing this? This isn't fun. So, that's where it ended up for me. And it isn't just that stock price isn't reflective of just one game. It's reflective of culture and decisions and how people are perceiving that, and it's hit their bottom line. And so what it's going to result in, like you just said, some course correcting.
That's the hope. That's definitely the hope. So we've got one more Star Wars story to talk about, and this one is the newest story that we have for today. Saving it for last because Daisy Ridley recently was talking about her coming back in Star Wars, and how she thinks it's the right time for her to return to the franchise. It's a pretty interesting interview that she gave. It's short, but it was with Premiere, and it wasn't all about Star Wars. It was just about her, Daisy Ridley in general. But I mean, what else is Daisy Ridley really associated with other than Star Wars? And so I'm excited to hear that she's excited to come back. That's the number one thing I got of this article, is that I'm happy Daisy Ridley is excited to come back. Given the reception to especially the last two sequel movies, it's good that she's not, deflated or, she said no or anything like that. She still wants to be a part of the galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, it sounds to me like she's a Star Wars fan, and I kind of think she sold that as her character in the films. And like she says in this article, if I didn't think the story was worth telling, I wouldn't have come back. So that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of confidence in this thing. And the other thing is that she says, I think it's the right time to come back. And we've had a lot of discussions about this in the past. I couldn't tell you what episode it is, but one of the conclusions we came up with is that one of the formulas for the success of a Star Wars movie is a good amount of time to let this thing cook, if you will.
Yep.
To use a more modern parlance that people are saying these days.
Right. Let it cook. Let it cook.
Yeah, and it takes more years than you would expect. Like the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, they're doing 1 or 2 or 3 years before those things turn around. A good Star Wars movies, I think it needs 5+.
Yeah.
And
at least to get the trilogy
rolling.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and then provide they got a good storyboard and a plan, you can do 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But to get a $1 billion idea, or a multi-billion in this case for a potential trilogy, you got to let it cook.
Yeah, I agree. Something in this interview that Daisy Ridley said makes me feel incredibly old also. Because one of her quotes that she has in this is, I'm also in a very different position. I was 21 when I did the first one, and I'm 32 now. And that is
oh my goodness.
insane to me, man. One, that it's been 11 years since they started production of The Force Awakens. And two, that Daisy Ridley is 32 years old. That is crazy to me,
right.
Man. That doesn't seem right. That is really, really nuts to me. Reading that, I was like, holy moly. So yeah, that caught me off out of left field. So she has changed. I mean, she's grown. She's absolutely a different person. Everybody's a different person 11 years later. And so it's going to be interesting. And she says she has some more experience, and this is going to give her new perspectives. And so I'm excited. I've been excited for the Rey movie. I'm going to stay excited for the Rey movie, and I'm ready for it to get off the ground. It's going to be fun. Seeing just these little tidbits every now and then about it's helpful to keep that excitement rolling.
Sure is.
So that wraps up our HoloNet news segment. We got one more segment to go, Colin. Why don't we hop on into the Star Wars moment of the week? All right, Colin, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
We would be honored if you would join us.
Oh man, mine's fantastic, and what I love, a big part of why we do this Star Wars podcast, and that's connecting with people out in the real world. We have our own lives and our own this and that. But for work, I went to an industry convention, and part of that was a golf tournament. And the folks I got partnered up with were a family, a father and his 2 sons. and they were every other hole. They were making some Star Wars comment or a joke that use the Force or young Padawan, some little quip or line from that. And so I got to expose our podcast to these guys and have a good fun discussion about Star Wars with them. And so it's really cool. I think we're going to pick up some new listeners. The industry I'm in doesn't have anything to do with Star Wars and is the furthest thing from it. And so are these guys. We're all in the same industry. And so to have a connection outside of just work with some people is, for me, that's a big part of reason of existing. Is meet new people and connecting on multiple levels than just what your work is. And so very fun, very cool guys, very cool experiences, and it's just great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome to hear, man. That's super cool. Love sharing Star Wars Station with folks. That's best thing you can do as a Star Wars fan, share Star Wars Station with people. But that's a good Star Wars moment of the week anytime that can happen. I've got one that I know you're going to love. I know a lot of people listening to this are going to love. I've got listeners that I'm thinking of right now that are going to be happy about my Star Wars moment of the week. And that is that I've got a 19-year-old cousin, Ethan. He was on our 100th episode just a few weeks ago. He comes and hangs out at the house on Monday afternoons because he's in college and he's got a big gap between his classes. Well, so I've taken these Monday afternoons to start showing Ethan movies he's never seen before and basically forcing him to watch things that I want him to watch. And so we watched 2 movies on Mondays, and one of the movies we watched was War Games. That is not my Star Wars moment of the week. Yeah. Just tossing out the fact that War Games is a great movie.
It's a great movie.
You like sci-fi in any way. It's barely sci-fi, but if you like sci-fi in any way, you're going to enjoy War Games. But the next movie that we watched right after War Games was Fanboys. And he had never seen it before, and he loved it. He thought it was super funny. I really, really enjoyed showing it to him. It's been years since I'd seen Fanboys, and for some reason, I was thinking about it that day. I was like, you know what? I'm sure he's never seen this movie, and he's like, he's got to see this movie, because we bond over Star Wars all the time, and if you haven't seen Fanboys, you have got to go watch it. Directed by massive Star Wars fan Kyle Newman, written by Ernest Cline, the guy who wrote Ready Player One that Steven Spielberg turned into a movie. And it is just about 4 Star Wars fans traveling to Skywalker Ranch to go break in and see Episode 1 before anybody else has. And it is hilarious. It is a 2009 comedy. It is in the vein of all of those comedies from the early 2000s that you're thinking about. And it's really, really good. It stands up there with all of those as being really funny.
Yeah, tons of nerdy jokes in that that are appreciative and make fun of the culture.
Right,
and
right.
I was anticipating that movie coming out, and when it did, it was hilarious.
Yeah, well, that movie was in development hell for a while also. That movie was in development hell for a little while. So that's what, honestly, I had this on here, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's perfect to talk about for development hell is Fanboys. And there's a ton of cameos in that movie, man. Every time I watch that movie, I'm like, holy crap, really? Like, there were that many cameos in this movie? And there's just a ton. I mean, it's got Billy D. Williams in it. It's got Carrie Fisher in it, and it's got a lot more. I mean, it's got a lot more, but those are like the 2 giant ones. So definitely worth seeing Fanboys if you've never watched it before. It's raunchy, though. I mean, it's out there with those early 2000s comedies. I was watching it, and I was like, oh, yeah, they could not make this today. Basically every 30 seconds, I'm like, oh, they couldn't make this today. Which is the case for most of those comedies, right? Like Talladega Nights, Step Brothers, The Other Guys, any of these comedies that are early 2000s, kind of raunchy comedies, no chance would those get made right now. So you got to go back and watch them.
I'm reading this cast list, and it's insane. Christopher McDonald, he was the Shooter McGavin and Happy Gilmore. Mm-hmm. William Shatner, Kevin Smith, Ray Parks in this.
Yeah, Ray Parks.
Cool, cool.
Yep. Jason Mewes is also in this with Kevin Smith,
Peter Mayhew,
which is super funny. Yeah, it's a stacked cast. Danny Trejo is in it. There's a lot going on. Seth Rogen plays 3 different people in it, which is really funny. But yeah, it's good. It's really good. So if you haven't seen Fanboys and you're a Star Wars fan, go check it out. Definitely go check it out. But that wraps up our podcast for the week. We appreciate you guys hanging on, listening with us. We appreciate you tuning into the Star Wars Station week by week, hearing us talk about Star Wars. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We had a blast talking about Jedi 3. I know we're both super pumped for that game. It is years down the road, but we're still going to be doing this podcast when it comes out, and we're still going to be streaming Star Wars games when it comes out. And we're going to be excited to do that. We're going to be excited to bring you guys Jedi 3. I know in a couple years, when we're actually delivering like news about Jedi 3 and doing our build-up to Jedi 3 where we're talking about what the game's going to be like, it's going to be fun to come back and listen to this episode and see if we got anything right whatsoever.
Yeah, this was a really great episode. I think we discovered a lot of territory. I will happily accept any royalties for ideas that were used as a result of this episode.
Yeah, that's the real reason we made it, was to get all the ideas out there fast as we can, so now we got to get the checks in the mail.
Yeah, and even if the royalty is a credit at the end, I'll be happy with that too.
Oh, they don't have to credit me at the end. You just have to let me be a stormtrooper scream that Cal dismembers, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. That's a great idea. But man, what a great episode, and what a great game this is going to be. We didn't set the bar too high, but surely not. The last two games were so fun, and we're going to have to play them again when the announcements and this one's coming out. We're going to have to stream them.
Yeah, well, it's going to be, when this game really does finally come out, it'll probably be, like I said, 27, 28. That's nearly a decade after Fallen Order. And so I'm just going to need to play Fallen Order for a refresher. I remember going before Survivor, I watched all of the cutscenes in order for Fallen Order to get a refresher for myself. And so I'll need that again for sure. Because that'll be, if I do go back and play Fallen Order, that'll be dusting off my PS4, pulling that out of that, which will be 2 console generations behind at that point. So that'll be pretty funny.
Get a PC. That's the answer.
Sure, I guess so. Well, I've tried that and I can't play some old games, so that's not foolproof. I'm sure I could play Fallen Order, but it's gonna be a lot of fun when that game finally comes out. I know we're gonna have a good time with it. We appreciate you guys listening to us. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you've made it this far, you're certainly a fan of the Star Wars Station. So please like us on YouTube, give us a subscribe. On Apple, on Spotify, leave a 5-star review, go write a review, leave us a rating. We would appreciate all of these things because it helps us grow. It helps us continue to reach more Star Wars fans. And that's what this podcast is about, is chatting Star Wars with everybody and chatting Star Wars with all of the fans out there. And that's what we really want to keep doing. And so, if you can do that, it's free and we'd really appreciate it. What else is free is you can follow us on all kinds of social media. We've got an Instagram, StarWars.station. We've got a Twitter, SW_station. We've got a Facebook, Star Wars Station, a Facebook group, Star Wars Station Cantina. You can find access to our Discord at the link of this podcast. You can find, or at the link in this podcast description, I should say. You can find our Twitch, twitch.tv/Station Media. You can find us on our website at StarWarsStationPodcast.com. We're all over the place.
Yeah, and we love connecting with people on Discord, Twitter DMs, Instagram DMs, anything you want to do, we'll chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We love to talk with you guys. We love chatting. And one of the best places to catch us is also over on our Patreon, patreon.com/Star Wars Station. And you can find all kinds of new content over there. We've got the RPG, we've got ARC Troopers, our other podcast. It's a whole podcast over there. We've got t-shirts, stickers, ways to engage with this podcast, all kinds of stuff. So just go browse it. Go check it out. Go look at patreon.com/Star Wars Station. And like I said, the rewards start at $1, and I got to say the $2 tier gives you access to a bunch. And so check those out. Check out the higher tiers. We appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate you guys engaging. We appreciate all of our Patreon subscribers. And we appreciate everyone listening to this, doing the one thing that we need you to do every week, and that one thing is staying wizard.